Thanks for tuning in tonight. Before we go any further, I want to let you know our next meeting, if you want to write it in your diary, I have made sure that Elvanto will send out a reminder, but our next meeting is Monday the 9th of July. So they're around about once every 6 weeks. But if you want to pop that in your diary now, Monday the 9th of July, make sure you don't double book it. My apologies for those. There's a couple of people who said they had other plans. I know I had notified you the dates previously, but I know we all like reminders, so just thought I'd remind you to pop that in your diary. And if something goes wrong with Elvanto or my brain, you can't say I didn't tell you. All right, so we're going to get into tonight's content and try and make sure we hit this thing on the head and finish the meeting by 8:30, as is always the case. So our format for tonight is that we're going to look a little bit at a mixture of internal and external stuff. So Jill's going to deal with some internal matters of the heart and share, and we'll have a bit of a conversation around that sort of stuff. And the idea is that can be interactive. So if if guys have any questions, or you might even want to throw to some of the leaders and ask them their thoughts.
It's encouragement, really. Encouragement?
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to do some practical external stuff to do with leadership. And that we'll probably just cover our night. Just try. The feedback we've had is that just having some shorter, sharper, practical stuff has been beneficial. So we'll have a crack at that. I want to let you know before we get into that stuff a little bit about what's coming up. So as you know, for those that were there yesterday, we started our brand new series. Be interested in your thoughts on how that went. I'm quite happy for you to give me feedback, because I said to a few people, it's a complicated topic to take on when you're dealing with the issue of suffering, because as much as anything, because it's very real to people's lives. You're dealing with a lot of pain in people's lives. So here you were in kids ministry, but if anyone has any thoughts or feedback or how it may have helped them, or any thoughts that you can give, that would be helpful to me too moving forward. Beck says, I think the visual representation was clear and effective. Thanks, Beck. What do you mean specifically? Do you mean the acting out where we've got the guys on stage? Is that what you meant? Okay, cool. How did it help, Beck? Emma says the same thing. How did the role play help? Cool. All right. Graham and Carol did such a good job at Wallandilly. You guys, your heart rate's probably just come back to normal after driving in Israel, and you guys acted the part really well. Like you knew exactly what we were going to do. Started blaming each other, a bit like you when you were driving in Israel, I suppose. All right. Well, that's helpful. Emma says she's a visual learner. Good. All right. Well, I'm going to try and do things like that a bit more often. They do take a bit more time to prepare, but I appreciate it. Elle says, thought the emphasis on caring over philosophical explanation really came through. Thank you, Elle. That's good to hear. We need both, but I think as Christians,
so I think that's the thing, probably for you, Brett, on this area, you don't normally kind of go into that mode of touchy-feely kind of preachy. So it's kind of, you've had to think it through, how to convey the message.
Sure.
Haven't you? I mean, I wasn't in there, but I've been mindful of those conversations.
Yeah.
In the lead up to it.
Yeah.
Of because that's not normally.
I'm not really a touchy-feely kind of guy.
You don't weep like.
No. No, I know. It's not normally my personality, I suppose. But I guess as leaders, it's important that whether we are that kind of that kind of person or not, we still need to be able to identify with that. And there's nothing like some form of pain or suffering in your world to actually cause that level of grief to come in and affect things.
You probably need to dig deeper to find for you people who don't relate necessarily to that themselves, like I do. So I can relate easily to that stuff, because I've been through lots of suffering and I'm very aware of it. But for you probably need to dig a bit deeper to think of how it's going to be relevant to convey that message to others.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point Jill makes. Probably for those of us that do that actually, maybe haven't had to suffer a tremendous amount of first-hand pain in my world. We all will at some point, and I have it in some areas. But but compared to what some people have been through, I've still got both my parents alive and so on. So, there's not that degree that some people have gone through. Jill having lost both her parents. My brother's obviously got cancer at the moment, but having seen Jill and other people go through it, it gives you
compartmentalise it more. I think that's more your temperament.
Yeah, but we all hit crisis at some point where we can't compartmentalise it. A couple other thoughts we have. Go back up. Janita says, I agree. The video was great aid to tell people's own experience of how to talk to their families about such issues as suffering. Great, thanks, Janita. Erin and Jimmy, the ideas coming from Job are a great representation of how Christians can themselves have a true understanding of where God is when we suffer. That's good. I'd like to hear a bit more thought on that, Jimmy. If you want to write down a little bit more about what you think there, that's fine. Take your time to do that. Bex says, I had 3 friends text me to ask if the podcast is available. Well, Darren will upload the podcast, and we haven't actually got them running as podcasts yet. That is on the to-do list, but we do have the files recorded. So once Darren uploads it, Beck will be able to give it to you, the link, so you can at least give them the podcast. Same for Emma. All right, that's good. Jimmy, feel free to jump in with any thoughts, or Erin, whoever that was that mentioned Job, of you two, mentioned that. I'm happy to hear your thoughts on that as well. Thanks for your feedback. Edwina, Nirvana, you both there. Do you want to just maybe share for a moment on what you ladies will be preaching about next Sunday, because you've got the floor next Sunday on this topic? One of you can jump in first, whichever one grabs the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I'm still preparing my message, but I really think, I guess like you even shared on Sunday, the whole thing, it's hard to explain or help people to really understand why there's so much pain and suffering with a God who's all powerful. But I think just emphasizing that God is all caring as well, and like right here with us in the suffering. And I guess I've just been chewing over the death of Lazarus and the way Jesus was in that story, and how he just showed the compassion of God and the care of God, like the shortest verse in the Bible, where Jesus wept, that he actually cried. It's not like he hired the mourners like they would back in those days to come and mourn for the families and for close loved ones, but he himself cried, and was moved, for the girls and for all the people. And I think we need to always remember that, like I know in my own journey too, doing that God cared and was there with me, and that's what I guess carries us through. So I don't know, that's what's right now on my heart as I'm chewing it over and just meditating over it. So I guess that's probably the angle that I'll come.
I love that. That's great.
Great.
That's really good. That'll be a great message to unpack the whole Jesus wept thing. I think it's intriguing to me. Jesus knew that a few minutes later he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and he's still weeping.
Absolutely.
That shows me his heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he didn't rescue them from that pain and suffering, when he knew that when they came and they told him, hey, he's really unwell, like unto death type thing, and he didn't go quickly and stop those events happening. It's like the pause of God. We don't always understand that because we don't see the whole picture, but he knew the miracle that was about to happen and what he was going to do, but nobody else did. And I think in our own lives, we're the same. We're so desperate for God to do the miracle, but we don't understand the pause of God and the why behind the pause. So, yeah.
So good, Ivana. Because in that case, Lazarus was raised from the dead, but, he's the answer Jesus gives, where he says, it's for your glory that I'm glad I wasn't there. It's for, it's for your glory I'm glad I wasn't there. That principle applies whether we see a breakthrough in this life or the one to come, I think, doesn't it? That sometimes the waiting is actually for our good in the end. We'll see a greater benefit from it if we can keep trusting him.
So emphasis on trusting God and being faith people, regardless of how things look, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Great, fantastic. Thanks. Edwina, how about you?
Yeah, bit the same. I was looking at the story of Lazarus as well. So good one, Ivana. And probably from the similar angle, but also just going through the story and looking at the reactions of the people in the story, of like the questions, the disappointment, so you've got, like Mary, you've got the disciples while he chose to stay, 2 days and not go straight away, and just looking at how the people in Jesus' world at that time all had different reactions and different questions and different responses, and that it's really a good snapshot of how we respond in times of suffering, and then how Jesus then responded back to that and spoke into that in a really loving and caring way, and in a patient way with us, with them and with us as well in those times. So yeah, I think that's kind of, I'm still preparing it as well, but that's kind of the line that I was thinking about going along.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's a great story to use. That'll touch people's hearts. So looking forward to hearing that too. Excellent. Yes. Beck says excited for these messages. Makes me think she's going to come to Wallandilly and hear that one as well again. Steve and Vicky, we all suffer sometimes, and Jesus did. So we have a way to deal with it. Good point. Yeah, we do. Jesus understands. Excellent. All right. Well, as we go into this series, so over the next few weeks, so Edwina and Ivana will be preaching at relevant campuses next week. Week after that, we are going to have a My Story segment, and I'm going to interview Jill at both locations, and also at Wallandilly we'll be interviewing Tony Curry. He's going to share a little bit about his journey losing his wife, and at Camden, Sonia Maida is going to share alongside Jill, and so she's got a story of rawness and a story of pain that she's going to share with us as well. So there's going to be some opportunity to hear from some people of how they've journeyed through pretty significant loss and grief, and having to trust God in the midst of all of that. And it hasn't always been easy for either of them. So I think that's going to do us a lot of good. And then the week after that, we're going to have an encounter service where we're going to pray for people and believe that the Holy Spirit will actually come and minister peace and life into people. And then I'll wrap up the series preaching that series, that commentary on Job. I know Jimmy's busy writing some thoughts down by the looks of it, so we'll do that. Jimmy, I'll take anything you can get on Job. That'll help me a lot, because it is a complex book, but the topic of suffering is complex in itself. So we'll do that, and then we're still going to, when we finish with that tough question in the first half of July, we're going to tackle a couple other tough ones that people ask, such as how could a good God condemn people to hell? The whole issue of hell, and isn't eternal suffering, isn't eternal pain too much? Surely that's light and fluffy stuff. Light and fluffy, feel good kind of stuff. We're gonna deal with that, because they're questions that people ask, and what we might find is that particularly that one is really a Western mindset. You go to other parts of the world. I touched on this, I think, in Wallandilly yesterday to some degree. You go to other parts of the world where they front the full brunt of wickedness. You don't have that people asking that question. It's just in our comfortable, Starbucks coffee life that we ask that question. But we'll address that question of that issue of hell. We're also going to address the issue of exclusivity. How can we as Christians claim to be the only, have the truth? And in a world where tolerance, quote unquote, is being spouted as what we have to do, how can we as Christians have an exclusive view? So we're going to tackle that as well. These are real life questions, so we'll be asking those. Before we move on, we'll just see what Richard and Patricia say. Patricia agrees with Ivana that she has always known of God's care when she was going through tough medical problems. Yeah, that's great, Patricia. You've been through some medical challenges and sensed God in it. I'm not sure I believe in hell discussion. I've learned enough about Andrew Tooby to know now, Andrew Tooby, we are not going down that path today. I used to think, Toobs, that you were just serious. Now I know you're just joking around. So we'll talk about that one and what that all is all about in a few weeks' time, but not tonight, because we'll never get through everything else. Excellent. Yes, postmodern world. We do have that. Thanks, Steve and Vicky. All right, Jill, why don't you share your thoughts, and we'll have a bit of discussion around that for 15, 20 minutes. And if you guys just type your questions as they come up, and we might engage with you and even ask you to pop your microphone on and share your thoughts with the group, or ask your question if you want to. But start us off, Jill.
Yes, I've just got a couple of thoughts I wanted to share. One that I was just thinking of as we were talking then about upcoming stuff and this theme of pain and suffering, is that I feel like and it ties into what I was going to chat about tonight anyway. I feel like when we set these themes in church, it's not just, oh, that seems like a good idea to preach on that theme.
Yeah.
Let's just throw that on the calendar and let's preach on that. It's because our leadership team and Rowan we've prayed and we've kind of thought, well, what do we really believe?
The issues.
We want to scratch where people are itching. We want to be relevant to what the need is. And I guess we choose these areas because we think that's what people want, that's what people need. That's what people need answers to have an encounter with God. And that's the fresh message or the fresh word of that season. And we don't know exactly what's going to be happening in that season, but we plan these things ahead of time. And so
also too, we planned this year, as we've said repeatedly in our culture, with a focus on unchurched. We do the whole internal thing really well.
Yeah.
So we wanted to really attack issues that prevent people from coming to Jesus, provide opportunities for people to invite people to church. And, with that in mind too, can I ask you again, jump on Facebook and find the events on the Facebook page, those of you on Facebook, and click share and actually tag people in the events. There's an event for every Sunday or promo video for the series. Can you just help us out there? Because we're paying to have that boosted. It's not super expensive, but that's nothing quite the same as you guys personally inviting people in your world. Just tag a friend who's asking for it or share it on your wall. We've had people come to Christ already. We talked about that last time. Phil and Kim. Phil mentioned his friend that's come to Christ as a result of this. Phil and Kim are a bit slack. They're sitting in Bangkok airport and they haven't logged on, which is a bit disappointing. I thought they could have logged on. Just kidding, they're in the middle of 48 hours of flying home.
They really need to hurry up and get home because we've got a lot for them to do when they get there. 4 Sundays away.
Yeah, 4 Sundays a bit slack.
Not letting them do that again.
So if you guys can, even right now as you're listening in, just jump on and share the posts. That will just help us a lot. All right, back to what Jill was saying.
What I was going to
say. You were going to say?
No, it was just on pain and suffering. Is I often find that we as leaders get tested in the message that God's bringing to the church. And so I don't think it's any surprise that many of us who I know I've had conversations with over recent weeks, we've been tested in this area ourselves. We feel like we're really struggling. We feel like there's a whole lot of pain stuff that's come up. We feel like there's a whole new level of suffering. We feel like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Is this just like, what is this? Is this a New Year's slump? What's going on? We were talking about it the other day of like, just feel like we could write off all of winter and just all, switch off and I feel like if there's any reason or any time where we could feel discouraged or disappointed or disillusioned or, it feels like, I'm not saying that great things aren't happening and all of that, they definitely are, and we're really thankful for that, but I think that there is a sense at the moment where it's a test in this area.
Yeah, sure.
And when we're in the middle of a test, we have to really fight to be optimistic and to see, to hear the good report. We have to be like Joshua and Caleb going out into the land and not coming back saying, oh my gosh, it's too hard, it's too much.
Because there are giants in the land.
Because there are giants in the land, and it's really hard. It can be really hard work. We can feel like coming home and, going to bed, and I haven't been well over the last month, so I feel like it's been a real effort for me just to push through and press into God and kind of, when you're not well or when for whatever reason our reserves are down, our resistance is down, it's even more, we have to be more mindful of kind of the battle and knowing this is a spiritual battle and we don't fight against flesh and blood but principalities and powers. So I guess that's just the sense I have in that, and I want to encourage you, if that's you and you're like, this is a really tough season, I'm feeling some pain right now, I'm enduring some suffering, I'm not well, or stuff's going on in your family or your kids or your finances or your work, or you just feel like this is really hard. I didn't think at the beginning of the year that come end of May, things were going to be quite so challenging. So I just really want to encourage you that it's okay. Like, it's a season and it is a testing. All times of testing, you will come through them. And that's the thing. We get discouraged when we're in the middle of them because we don't know how long they're going to last and we don't think we can endure. But we can, and we will get through them.
Yeah.
And we just really need to, in those times, I mean, there's lots and lots of scriptures that encourage us in that. But really, I guess, just, I think what we really need, something, a simple thing to come back to is just looking to the Lord. And it sounds really cliche and like, yeah, we all know that, but it's just finding him again and going, you know what, I just need to get into that place where, you know, I know it's okay on the inside.
Yeah, sure.
I know God's with me,
yeah,
and it's going to be all right. And
yeah.
I can, and really that's what you're talking about with pain and suffering. We're talking about that in the story about Lazarus.
Trusting
it's like,
God
it's going, Lord, I'm looking to you.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand the whole situation or the circumstances right now, but I'm looking to you. My eyes are on you.
Yeah.
I know you're good. I know you're for me. I know you've got my back, and it's going to be okay. I'm going to come through regardless of the fact that I feel at the moment like it's not, you know, it's not a great feeling, but I'm not about my feelings. Sure. I'm about faith. And so,
well, I think this time of year too, Jill's making the point, in church life in wintertime, especially during the sort of June to August, a lot of churches go through a bit of a slump, and and we probably struggle with it, say, at Camden more too, because of the time of day. So it's darker, and but traditionally, you know, talking to other pastors, it's a pretty tough time, the winter months for church, and so part of that is just, you know, the shorter days, the lack of light. That can actually, you might not think that makes any difference, but it does affect people psychologically.
Yeah.
And so as leaders, we can feel flat, or we can have a quiet service and we can feel discouraged by that. But I would say, you know, without having a pat answer, recognise that you can feel flat. You can maybe feel discouraged if things your team aren't going as well, or you can't get enough people because, you know, people this time of year, people tend to be switched off. We can switch on our faith at that point to some degree, and even now make a decision and go, okay, there's a few things I can do. First of all, be present, trust God, believe God. Steve says hibernate in the Lord. Yeah, so trust God, believe God. But beyond that, switching on your faith means doing some practical stuff. So, for instance, as leaders, it means showing up at church on time and early. And I remember a pastor saying to me years ago when I first came to Mount Annan, said, if you're a leader, you need to lead in worship. And so that means if you don't feel like putting your hands up in worship, put your hands up in worship. In fact, go over and above whatever you would normally do demonstratively. And it's not that you're faking it. It's actually, well, one, it helps your own spirit. But if you're a leader and you lead and you're demonstrative in your worship, people will actually physically take their lead from you. If the front row isn't engaged, so to speak, then don't expect the back row to be engaged. So, you know, if there's a mist in if there's a mist in the pulpit, there's a fog in the pew, that concept. So if you can switch on your faith and go, I'm going to trust that God is up to something good, you can actually shift the spiritual atmosphere just with that decision as leaders, because there's a spiritual component to it. I know it's not easy all the time, but if you do it, the people will follow that you lead.
Yeah. And the other thing is just a couple of scriptures, you know, Romans 5:3-4 talks about rejoicing in our sufferings. And it says, you know, suffering produces endurance, and endurance character, and character hope. And we don't like to think about those things when we're in the middle of suffering. Over the last month when I haven't been well, I haven't wanted to think, oh, this is really great because it's making me learn endurance.
Especially when your husband's been away.
I'm not wanting to think that way, but I've actually, you know, I've had to make that choice to go, no, God knows that something in me needs to be produced in endurance. Good. And I definitely have that testimony that although I had to make choices and I had to push through, and it wasn't easy, I had to put out, you know, some messages to people to pray for me, and I put out, you know, chatted with Edwina one day when I was feeling like I was struggling, and you know, it's not that we suffer in silence, but be aware that things are happening on the inside of us when we are growing, and we don't even recognize it, we don't see, but actually our character is going to change and be different when we come through suffering, and hope is in that. And so I think that's really what I guess I want to encourage you in. And also Galatians 6:9 is, you know, don't become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. And it's kind of like, you know, Joshua going around the walls of Jericho. It's like those scriptures of, you know, Joseph being in the pit, kind of like when's things going to change? When's the breakthrough going to come? When are these walls going to come down? When am I going to get, you know, when are they going to remember that I'm down in this pit and call me out? And it's just that endurance. And endurance feels tough, but it's good for us. And
I know I just ran 10K and I've only run 3 in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
it killed me.
Yeah, and it feels awful, but it's good for us. And so that's kind of really in a snapshot, you know, what I wanted to share was a couple of things. Was, you know, when we go to conferences and when we've given feedback, like to Greg and Julie French just recently about, well, what do you like about C3 and what do you enjoy about going to conferences and etc. They're asking us lots of stuff. And I said, well, we said one of the things we actually really like is just the really practical stuff of people saying, well, you know what, I was in this situation and it all looked dismal and I got through. And we're like, oh, really? Oh, that's so good to know that.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's what I'm saying to you now is that, you know, and there is seasons where things feel a bit tough. And I think coming into winter, it can feel a bit like that. We're on a season of, we're preaching about pain and suffering.
It doesn't mean all of you are feeling that way, but we've had conversations with a few different people.
Yeah,
I sense that there's a little bit of that going on. So
but that's right. But what I
says
think
great
is,
encouragement. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, what I think is, and I've heard Pastor Phil say this, and Brian Houston, actually, we heard both of them speak on this within a short time of each other, probably a couple of years ago, of, you know, when they were asked to, you know, what's one of the most important things as a leader you pass on to other leaders, and we need to be mindful of modelling this and passing this on to younger leaders as well. As no, it's not all about our gift and our ministry and how we look on the outside, or whether we look like there's fruitfulness, or whether something looks like it's great and it's great. It's about actually what's happening on the inside.
Sure.
So we might have everything polished and looking great, and a veneer, and people thinking, oh, you know, that this all looks nice, but if we've got anger and we're struggling in our inner world, and the condition of our souls not in a great place, or you know, you might have unforgiveness. You know, I know I've struggled with unforgiveness, and I wondered why my soul felt sad. And you know, and I had a revelation. Well, actually, I need to forgive some people. So sometimes it's leading ourselves, and this is what I've heard, you know, Pastor Phil say. Actually, leading yourself is one of the hardest things. Leading other people is easy compared to leading yourself.
True.
And leading ourselves, it's tough because because of you know, like we're talking about with this whole thing of suffering, and it's like a bit like you say about exercise. It's like you kind of might know what your body needs. You might know internally what you need.
Still got to get up and do it.
But you've got to have the will.
Yeah.
And you've got to rely on God for that, and you can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
And then you sort of think, well, I've got all these choices. What do I do? And so leading yourself and going, okay, I'm going to make a good choice to do this, and I'm going to follow through on it. Some of us find that easier than others. But I think
I think sometimes it depends on what season of life we're going through, because if we're having a particularly tough season, anyone can struggle with that.
Yeah, that's right. And so we talked last month a little bit on that whole thing of, you know, temptation for sin, and that I read that quote of John Piper saying temptation most often enters through a door intentionally left open. And so it's that kind of thing of leading myself is not leaving doors open. It's leading myself and going, actually, in this moment, I could go towards temptation, but I'm going to close that door and I'm going to go towards this. I'm going to go this way because the narrow gate.
What things close the door? What things in your world do you have to do to close the door? Is it like the disciplines, spiritual disciplines, things like that?
I think spiritual disciplines, just getting off Facebook sometimes, getting out of the comparison zone.
Good point. Yeah.
Boundaries, having boundaries in things where I feel like I'm letting everyone else railroad my life, and I need to be the one. I'm the only one who can lead me. Everyone else is responsible for them. I can't keep being like a victim and blaming everybody else, going, well, Lord, I would have done that, but you know, that happened and that happened and that happened. I'm like, but I've got to I'm the only one who can control. I'm the only one who can lead myself. And I have to go, well, actually, I'm gonna make my own decisions. I'm gonna have boundaries there. I'm not gonna let that happen. I'm not gonna let that person dictate that to me, because I make my decision with God and with, you know, those around me, my delegated leadership, and with you.
Yeah.
I you know, we do this. I don't let other people. If there's something unhealthy, I've got to be mindful of leading myself well, and the condition of my own soul. So I think sometimes, we talked about this last month, we make assumptions that the more we grow in God and our relationship with God, then the less struggle that we'll have, and the more mature we are, you know, the less need we'll have. But I think that's not what Scripture shows us. I think Scripture shows us that right through, you know, Paul talked about the thorn in the flesh, and it never left him.
Yeah.
He had to grapple. And I think all of our days on this earth, yes, we're going to keep growing and we're going to mature from
infants. But it doesn't mean we get to a point where there's no pain or suffering.
But it doesn't mean that might be a moment. And I talked to Deb White, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and she called me. She said about the whole thing of, you know, your Achilles heel. If you don't know what that is, look up Greek mythology. About this whole thing of, you know, this
weak spot
that we can have, which is like what Paul said about
the
thorn in the flesh. And Deb was like, we'll always have our weak spots. We're always going to have things where we're like, oh, I'm a bit vulnerable there still. And we have to be mindful of that, and we have to stay strong in that area. And that's where, if it's about forgiving a certain person, or if it's about rejection or something, we have to be versed on what we can do to counter that opposing thing coming at us.
Yeah.
Because that's what the enemy will use when our reserves are down, when we're isolated, when we're sick, when whatever. That's what the enemy will use. And so, even talking to Deb the other day, it was really encouraging to me that she's still telling me, and she's my leader, and she's, I really respect her, and she's been a leader for a long time. She still said, we've got sensitive areas. We might be strong in 99 areas, out of 100, but that one area, the enemy will try and get a foothold there because he knows that's our weakness.
Yeah.
And we've got to be aware of that and go, that's okay. I know I've got a weakness there, but I'm going to learn the scriptures I need to learn. So if it's about fear, I need to learn the scriptures about fear so that I can not let that fiery dart hit me. It might come, it'll still come at you, but you then go, no, I've got my, my protective mechanism. I know the scripture. I know what I need to prevent that from actually lodging in me and causing pain.
Sounds like it's resounding with a few people, Jill. People saying they love it. Desi or Dave, probably Desi was saying that Brian Houston has a current podcast about this on the power of weakness.
Yeah.
So better log into that one and have a look. And I mentioned yesterday too, Christine Cain's book that you put me onto, Jill, and if you're interested in that, we'll give you the link. You can grab the book. It's called Unexpected, and I'm about halfway through it. Jill said to me the other day, I said, did you enjoy it? And she said it's probably the best book she's ever read. So I don't know if that's just where you're at right now, but it is very good. It's from a strong...
I was listening to an audio and I kept pausing and writing notes.
Well, from a strong leader, I've always found Christine Cain to be a very strong, decisive kind of leader, but to have her share about some rawness in her life and some pain and suffering that she's gone through relationally and sickness and with death of a mum and all that sort of stuff and how it knocked her around. So
I think many of us look at leaders and think, oh, okay, that must be how you have to be a leader. You must be like, Joyce Meyer or something. The thing is, everyone's got stuff. And I think what I like about Christine Cain is she's sharing there about the fact that even though she's, and it's like our state and our standing. It doesn't, where we are with, Ephesians talks about state and standing. So where we are in standing with God doesn't change.
Affected by our current state.
But our current state will be up and down. Yeah, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that we're further away from God.
Good point.
And so, I just wanted to encourage you and finish with that thought that I think that actually we are really on the edge of a breakthrough. I really sense that, and you see this through Scripture, the fiery trials, the times when it feels like it's tough and people are so, I feel like, I almost gave up, but I looked to God and I came through and, I saw the crown through the suffering. I saw the light through the darkness. And I feel like that we are on the edge and that breakthrough is coming. So I just want to encourage you to know that we're grateful for you. We can't do this on our own. We're not super
especially grateful for the way everyone was held things when I was away. It meant a lot to me personally as a leader.
Yeah.
I kept an eye on things, but I kept thinking, I don't have to do that much. Everything's running well. Even with Jill not being well, everyone else pitched in and everything was great. Yeah. That's what a team's about.
Yeah. And so just be encouraged that, even whether it's personally or in church or in whatever, like it says in Galatians 6:9, don't give up, keep going, and in due time you will reap. And in that waiting time, keep looking to God, and He will sustain us. He gives us all we need. And like Ivana and Edwina said with the story in Lazarus, it's like in that wait time, that's when our character's being formed, and as we look to God. So that's it.
Well, in light of that, we give Mary, the whole Mary and Martha story. We give Mary the praise for sitting at Jesus' feet in the whole story, where Martha's busy cooking, but just goes to show everyone responds differently, because out of the two sisters, the one who responded more effectively at the death of Lazarus was Martha, not Mary. Martha was the one who went straight to Jesus. She she poured out her heart to Jesus. Mary stayed back. So we all have times where we do okay, and there are other times when we don't. It's just going to be the way life is, and Jesus is always open to us regardless of where we're at. Yeah. Louise says she's a Martha. I have a term I call Martharitis. I usually catch Martharitis when I get busy doing stuff and need to press into Jesus, and I don't sit at his feet. I get busy doing the stuff. That's good, Jill. I had a thought that I was going to back up from that, but I can't remember what it was now. You did such a good job with that.
Another scripture, but I won't.
Go for it, because we've still got a few minutes. No, go for it.
Okay.
Share it.
I just read this today and thought it was just a good one to share with you. I love the Apostle Paul talks a lot about right through his books, which I did a thing the other day on the YouVersion reading plan all about Paul's books. And he speaks, even though he's like says some things that smack people around a bit sometimes, which I would have found really annoying if I was around him probably in that day. But he also one of the things I love is he's always talking about how he's praying for people, and he's like, I'm praying for you, I'm asking God for this for you, and I love that. So just Colossians 1:9-10, and this kind of was like, my heart, our heart for you guys. Well, you didn't even know, so I won't say you, but I think it is your heart. And so from the day we heard, we've not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. I just really like that his prayer was about spiritual wisdom and understanding, but it was about walking in a manner worthy of the Lord. And I think as we lead ourselves, like I said, if we lead ourselves and lead our own heart effectively, we'll walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, and that's fully pleasing to him, because that's really what matters. What matters most is being pleasing to God, not being pleasing to man, not ticking the boxes that we did all the stuff that we were supposed to do at church or in our role or whatever, but that we pleased God, and that we look to him. And like I said, I think the other day on Mother's Day when I was speaking, is sometimes we don't like to say as leaders, because we need people active in church life. We don't want to say, actually, if you do nothing, God's still going to be pleased with you, because we're like, no, please don't do nothing. We want you to do stuff. But it is true that actually the most important thing is that you be pleasing to him, that you look to him and you grow in your relationship with him, and that's our heart more than anything. Yeah,
well, we've said it to some of you guys have had to say it to you. Who you are is more important than what you do.
Yeah. And that you bear fruit. You'll bear fruit in every good work.
Well, that's it. The fruitfulness comes out of that first seeing in Christ rather than the other way around, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's counterproductive when we just. And I found this when I was sick, and the doctor said to me the other day, take 2 days off and take the rest of the week off. And you said to me, I'll just watch Netflix. Like, you gave me permission to watch TV during the day.
Well, the doctor said
I didn't give myself permission to do that. I was like, no, I'm not going to watch TV. But you were like, so I thought, okay, I can watch TV.
I was in Israel. I couldn't do much about it.
So, but other than that, but no, one thing I did find about stopping and just resting because I wasn't well was like, oh, wow, God still turns up.
Yeah, good.
It's not about me running around being busy going, oh, I did this and I did that and I achieved all these things. And I did all these things, and I contacted people, and I did, all those things are great, and I want to do those things because that's, to me, part of fruitfulness of my relationship with God. But it was a really good lesson,
but your relationship
and I was being tested in the fact that even if I do nothing and I'm lying on the lounge and I'm not well, and then he's still pleased with me, and I can still be content and happy because that's the season, that's the moment, that's the moment we're in.
Yeah.
And so I think some of us who are like Marthas, who are we can be a bit works-based. We can be thinking, I've got to do all this stuff, and that's what makes God pleased with me. He's pleased with you if you look to him and you just keep looking to him. And I think that probably helped change my perspective even the other day when I wasn't well, and I just went, suddenly I just remembered. Actually, I can still hang out with God even though I'm sick. So I put some worship music on and I just kind of enjoyed resting, knowing he's with me. And I think that sometimes, we can be a bit focused on what we do, but it's more about, knowing that God is faithful and good, and He's enough when we
even when we're not able, or we're going through seasons. Yeah, that's a good segue into. I was just looking back at what Jimmy had sent me a message. I asked him about that, to comment, and two things that Jimmy said in the message. You guys won't see it because he just sent it to me, but the two of the points I made yesterday. So that's good, Jimmy. Glad that we're on the same page. Jimmy said that, he says 2 quick thoughts so I don't miss the meeting. That's encouraging. The whole concept of that we have this view that if we have you didn't hear it, but if we have I think I've shared it with you before I went away, we have a good life. We'll have a good life if because we have a good God and we do good stuff for God. And that somehow presupposes that life will be comfortable. And saying that that's the wrong formula to start with.
Yeah.
That, we're setting ourselves up for failure because we live in a fundamentally broken world, and there's no guarantees that our good life, our good living is going to automatically assure us.
Well, none of us would be qualified to be leaders. Most of us wouldn't be qualified to be leaders. So probably out of all the 40 of us that are in this tonight, there's probably maybe a handful of us that might think, that haven't had, massive challenges in their life, and so we'd all think, well, I must be disqualified.
Yeah.
I mustn't be for me.
Yeah.
And I think as we're raising leaders in the next generation, we're very mindful of modelling this as well. That it's not how good we are.
Yeah.
But it's what God.
It's God's grace
has done.
Yeah.
And God's grace that God can do in us.
Yeah. And God's grace is the key, because everything good that we have, I think it's James, every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father, in whom there is no shadow of turning. We think that somehow we believe in a good God, but we think that our actions somehow demand that God moves. And sometimes for Christians, that can even be what we think it's not good works. We just think it's our spiritual disciplines, but really, or we act in faith. Well, there is truth in the fact that faith moves God, but it's not faith in faith, it's faith in God. And we can get to the point where we think that our faith and our speaking in faith and our prayer and all that is somehow that becomes the good work. No, it's still ultimately everything is a gift from God.
The recipe for
that's the recipe,
for a good life.
Yeah, faith in faith, not faith in God.
We wonder why we struggle.
And then life happens to us. And so everything, theologians say there's common grace and there's special grace. And common grace is the fact that rain falls on the earth, the fact the sun comes up tomorrow, and every human being has that. Special grace is to do with salvation. But everything in between, there are no guarantees in this life. The guarantee, which is what Jimmy's second point was, the guarantee is that regardless of what happens, Jesus is with us. And that's what you're sharing, that Jesus showed up anyway, even though you weren't able to do the stuff that could be regarded as the work of the ministry or the good stuff. Jesus will show up anyway.
It's just a current example of that.
Yeah. And everything flows out of that. So, guys, I want you to just, if that's speaking to you, and I know numbers of people have said it has, and that's great. Janelle says it's crazy how such a simple solution can be effective, and that's true. Why don't you pray for people maybe feeling like it's tough right now?
Sure.
And then we'll move on.
Lord, I just thank you that you are so kind and that you are a good Father, and that you love us so much. And Lord, I just thank you for everyone in this team. Lord, we're so grateful for such an incredible bunch of people to have in our world, and to have sharing the load of carrying these local churches forward. And so, Lord, I just pray for any of us who are feeling like we're struggling or feeling weak in whether it's in body, soul, or spirit, in any part of us, and we're just feeling like it's maybe things have become discouraging, things have become overwhelming, things we're struggling to see the light through the darkness. And I just pray for those people, for all of us, that you would be our strength. Lord, I just ask for a fresh revelation and sense of who we are in you, that we are loved by you, that we are your children, and that you delight in us. And I just pray that you would give strength. I pray that you would bring encouragement. I just pray that even from tonight's discussion, that there would be that we would be able to go away from this tonight knowing that we're not alone, that we're a part of a company of people. We're part of a group. We're part of a team, and that we have each other, and that we have you, Lord, that is for us, and you're not against us. And I thank you, Lord, that you give us this family of God, that we can support each other, that we can pray for each other, that we can be in community together. And so I just pray you'd encourage every heart, and Lord, any area in anyone's life that needs some extra attention, that maybe that you're pinpointing something where you're saying, it's time for me to work on that. That's why I'm letting it be shown right now. That's why I'm revealing the weakness in that area. I just pray that you would help in your grace for us to unpack that and to get help if we need to pray through that or to talk through it, so that, Lord, we could become stronger and be overcomers. And Lord, I just thank you that you say that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, and that we love not our lives unto death. So, Lord, we look to you in these days, and I thank you that we, although there may be testing, Lord, you are a good God, and we look to you, and I know that we can come through triumphant because we have you on our side. So, be with everyone that needs you, and just pray for a fresh impartation of something special for them to help them in this time. Amen.
Amen. Good. All right. Well, if you have any specific thoughts that you want to add in, pop in. Feel free to pop them online if there's something pertinent that you'd like to add to what we've just shared. What Jill's just shared, it was great. Really, from the heart, it's great. Otherwise, we'll switch gears. I can come back if you type something in, but we'll switch gears and we'll start to look at some external leadership stuff in the next 25 minutes before we finish. Just in different conversations with different leaders in the last month or two, it's come up that I thought it would be good to kind of address some stuff around how to have conversations with people in your leadership team, how to have conversations with people you lead where you've got to have what you'd call a crucial conversation. And there's always a need for crucial conversations in leadership. There's always need for candid conversations in church life. But I'll be the first to say it's not always easy to have those kind of conversations. And so I just thought it'd be worth taking some time to give you some pointers, some tips. I'm certainly by no means an expert in this. I've been coached into some stuff. Jonathan Kelly has worked with me 2 or 3 times over the last few years around this area of crucial conversations. I know he even did a session with the pastors at National Conference a couple of years ago, and the session he did with all the pastors in our level. So it was like 30, 35 pastors there, and he did this whole session around crucial conversations. And so I wanted to kind of address that, particularly because we've been in a season of culture shift and culture change in many regards. And so when you're in a season of culture change, it will often require a heightened amount of these kind of conversations. Some of you have sat in the room with us when we've had to have some crucial conversations, and they're never always easy, but they need to be had. And so I just thought maybe some tips along the lines of how you can go about that. And so we're going to put all this into Trained Up. As I said at the beginning, my normal software didn't seem to be working. It kept crashing. So I'm using the software to record within the GoToMeeting program. I've got a concern that it might actually just be recording audio and not video. But if it's just video, I will, if you're listening to this afterwards, I'll try to put the diagrams into the Trained Up so you can actually see them separately, even though you won't be able to see them on the video. But I'm going to try, for you guys that are watching online, I'm going to try to share some diagrams with you on the screen so you can follow along. So what I want to do is, before we actually get into how to have a crucial conversation, I wanted to back up to some stuff that we spoke about back in our March meeting. Those that were online, remember I did a small section about how to be the ideal team player. We talked about Patrick Lencioni's book, The Ideal Team Player, and we drew up 3 concentric circles. And in his book, he says that the ideal team player is a person who is an ideal mix of humble, hungry, and smart. And so I'm going to try and put that up on the screen for you. I'll see if I can share my screen with you. Share my screen. Share. And I'll switch my camera off for a minute. I'll leave my camera on if I can, just so you guys can, it's easier to listen in if you can see at the same time. But can I just get a couple of yeses if you can see my screen? Okay, good, thanks, Rod. All right, so you remember I shared this concept of humble, hungry, and smart, those that were here, and we talked about how every one of those, if you have all three of those mixed together, you become the ideal team player. And that is humility is obviously the primary one. You need to be a humble person. A humble person is not always just the person who appears humble. Sometimes people can be overly humble, and that's just really rooted in pride as well. In other words, they don't put themselves forward enough. And I explained that was one of my challenges is I'm okay if I'm a big fish in a small pond, but put me in a big pond and I battle with sense of lack of self-significance and confidence being my issue for a long time, and some of you will identify with that. Other people, it's more, the lack of humility is more obvious because you tend to overextend yourself. Everybody's different, but true humility is truly being comfortable with who you are at the right level, things that God has gifted you with, and being confident in those things, but not overextending yourself. Hungry, Patrick Lencioni says, is the right amount of hunger. It's not overly hungry, but it's just being passionate about whatever it is that you're doing. And these principles apply to family, business, sporting club, church life, any area. And smart, he said, is not about intelligence. For those that may not remember, smart is really people smarts. It's closer to emotional intelligence. And it's that understanding, that ability to comprehend people, read people, understand where people are at, socially aware of them, and so on. And if you have a good mix of those three, then you'll be able to be the ideal team player and play most effectively, or be a part of a team most effectively. Someone's got their microphone on. I can hear somebody. Janita, your microphone's on, I think. I just hear some background noise there. And so we want to just kind of refresh on that a little bit, and then we'll move on to how that applies to having a conversation, being a smart person, being able to have people smarts. And he develops that further and says the ideal team player, as you can see, is in the middle here. In order to be that, you need to have a mix of all three. And he says the person who is hungry and not humble. So the person who is hungry and not humble is the bulldozer, and they'll just barge their way through life, barge their way through everybody else. The person who is overly humble is the pawn, just gets pushed around because their humility is not balanced by the other. And the person who is the smart person, he calls the charmer. The smart person, the person who can win everybody over, is the charmer. Now, I took this a little bit further as I was thinking on this and dwelling on this, and I've kind of just done a few little other diagrams to show us, and I'll go to the next slide. You'll see the I wanted to change it from the ideal team player to the ideal team leader. So these principles, I believe, are important for us too. And so what can actually happen is if we haven't got a good mix of humble, hungry, and smart as a leader in your team or your gathering, whatever you're doing, you're potentially setting yourself up for this. So the person who is overly humble, the pawn, if you like, the person who is a pawn, what will happen is if you're only humble and not hungry or smart, your team will ultimately replace you. They will end up being the leaders. So whoever you're leading will end up leading you, because you'll be swayed by other people's opinions unnecessarily. And we all know instinctively we can't please everybody, but you'll end up, your team will replace you. If you are the bulldozer, your team will resent you. So if you're the pawn, your team will replace you. If you're a bulldozer, it'll come to a point where your team will just resent your leadership because they just feel like they're being used, trodden on, pushed over. It's like your agenda, not their agenda. And so a bulldozer personality is dangerous. And why I'm saying this is because we will all have tendencies where we'll identify in one of these areas. And if you go back
probably all think of a boss that we've had like that.
We can probably all think of a boss like that. Yeah. The question is, no, not on here. Probably talking about a husband.
About you.
Yeah. But you're talking about me being. I know.
Sorry, just kidding.
I know, yeah. But we can all have these areas where we might know someone, identify with someone else like that. But I want us to take it a bit more personally as leaders Darren said last time that, he spent a lot of time studying emotional intelligence as part of his job, and part of it, he'll tell you, even part of his own requirement. He was asked to work on his own emotional intelligence. So he's been coached in this in the business world. And he says emotional intelligence can be learned. These attributes can be learned. They're not just set in concrete like your intelligence quotient is. Your emotional quotient can be learned. And one of the best ways to do that is to actually ask someone. Do the survey that I sent out that was in the last, you go back to Trained Up from March, you'll see the survey. Do that survey and see where you sit. If you're not sure, see where you sit in this. Also ask people who lead you and expect an honest answer. Give them permission to say, tell me honestly, what am I? Am I too humble? Am I too hungry? Am I too smart? Do I have this balance right? And also ask the people who you lead, because sometimes we're quite good at letting the people above us see the best of us, but ask the people who you lead to share on what they think too, and be humble enough to ask them for their input. Because if we don't, we'll end up with one of these problems. Our team will replace us, our team will resent us, or if we're a charmer, it might go okay for a while, but eventually your team will resist you because they see that you've won them over with sweet talk, and we all eventually can pick out the people who are good at sweet talk. So
the thing about us and other people is that we don't often recognise.
We don't recognise it
ourselves. We can think, we can have our perception of ourselves could be that we are, a certain one of those, or we might think, oh no, I'm really this. Which is why it's good to ask other people.
Absolutely good to ask other people.
It's not what we think, it's what other people, it's what we portray.
So the survey that we did back in March there, it actually, the way the survey's question, which comes out of Patrick Lencioni's book, is really good. It actually says, other people would say this about me. So it actually forces you to think about what other people would say, but there's nothing.
Even though that might not be your intention,
that's what other people think. That's right. It's about other people's perception.
Yeah.
And we're all going
usually we have the right intention. We all
absolutely.
Especially in church life, we all want to do the right
thing. We want to do the right thing.
We don't even realise how sometimes we've been perceived by people.
Yeah, totally. And that's why we need to have this accountability. We need to ask people in our world. And this applies to your family, your marriage, your workplace, your kids, if you're on a sporting team, all of these things. These will affect it. And if you can improve in these areas, like especially this area of smart, the thing about people who lack people smarts is they don't realise that they lack people smarts. It's probably the one area where, out of all of them, where you really struggle to recognise that you lack it. So your team will replace you, your team will resent you, or your team will resist you. That's if you have one of those, but not two. And then he goes on. Hang on, Chris says, I feel really silly asking this, but do you mean sweet talking? What do you mean by sweet talking in leadership? Stacey says. What do I mean by sweet talking in leadership? I don't remember what I said that was along those lines. Can't think of the context.
The charmer.
The charmer, like the charmer. Yeah, okay. So I guess what I just meant was that a charming person has a charisma about them that wins people over. So a good example of this is if you can be a people smart, an emotionally intelligent person, and actually still be a very poor team player and a very poor team leader. For instance, Adolf Hitler was incredibly people smart because
you know how to persuade
people, but it's not with the right motives.
Not correct.
So your motives aren't for other people. If you lack humility, your motives aren't for other people. If you're not hungry, you're not passionate about what you're doing.
You might be good at sales, like you're selling something.
Yeah.
You might be good at building a big team because you've got a big sell up front, but then you don't follow through with what you actually promised them.
Yeah, that's right. It's to do the sell but not follow through. Good point. So I guess I hope that makes sense, Stacey. That's where I was going with that. Good, excellent. You're so talented, you can be rostered every week. I reckon that's pretty good, Rod.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, yeah. Yeah, you're sweet talking a person. I like it.
Convince them
to do something, yeah. That's a good example.
And they really find out.
And they find out that really they were being sweet talked into it. So, and then Patrick Lencioni goes on and he talks about when you have two but not three. And so the person who is humble and hungry is what he calls the accidental mess maker. I guess they're like a bull in a china shop. They mean well, they're passionate, but they tend to make a mess everywhere because they're not reading people. They're not reading the signs. They're not aware of how their decisions or their choices are affecting other people. The person who is humble and smart is the lovable slacker. Everyone likes them, but they're not overbearing, but they're not overly engaged and overly involved either. And the person who is hungry and smart is like the skillful politician. And that's probably quite a dangerous spot to be. I guess Adolf Hitler could be argued as being like that. There was absolutely zero humility. And people who are dictatorial in leadership would be regarded as skillful politicians, where they play the game really well. So that's the concept of what he was saying with regard to how that plays out. And then I wanted to take that. We talked about how in the last category we had people resisting you, resenting you, and replacing you. And as a leader, a person who is an accidental mess maker, if you're a leader and you have that problem, eventually your team will weary of you. The last three were all W's. These are R's. These are three W's. Your team will weary of you because they'll get sick of the mess. They'll get sick of you kind of starting new things, not finishing, not thinking through the concept. And to be honest, that's what my history has been like. Jonathan Keldy has had me working on over the last couple of years, working on my emotional intelligence, becoming aware of my own reading social cues and so on, because I don't tend to do that very naturally. And so because of that, that's my issue, is being an accidental mess maker. I get all excited or passionate about something, but I don't have the people smarts to realize that I've made a mess in the process, haven't read the signs, and people have been burnt out and so on. So people get weary by that. So I'm telling you honestly, that's an area where I struggle, and hopefully, you might identify with some of these. So if you're an accidental mess maker, people will weary of you. If you're a lovable slacker, people will wander with you. So your team won't actually get anywhere because you're not passionate enough to go in any one direction. So you feel yourself going around in circles, and your team's left to wander around in circles with you if you're a lovable slacker. Moving right along for the sake of time, only got 10 minutes left. If you're a skillful politician, your team will soon become wary of you. They may not at first, but eventually what will happen, because humility is not coming through, people will become wary of you. They will not trust you, and they'll hear, I've heard this before, and especially in Australia where we have this whole tall poppy syndrome. If you're a politician, people don't like politicians very much. So that can happen to you. If you're weary, people will weary of you. They'll wander with you, or they will be wary of you. So to be an ideal team leader, we need to kind of work on whichever one of those it is. So I wanted to bring that back to the surface again and remind you of that we did a couple of months ago. And if you didn't do that survey, jump on the train up and do it from that concept of, not just from the concept of being part of a team as a player, but also if you're a leader, a gathering leader, a department leader, which most of you are, or have some kind of leadership, pastoral responsibility in the church, then do it from that perspective as well, and recognize the importance of looking at it. And you can even do this reverse. If you feel as though your people are wary of you, for instance, maybe you need to ask yourself, am I exuding enough confidence or enough humility? So you can look at it in reverse as well. And that sort of leads into what I wanted to share about, which is the crucial conversations stuff that we'll just touch on in the next few minutes. The Crucial Conversations book is a book that Jonathan Keldy put me onto. I remember Tony Dodds saying he'd done it in the workplace. Some of you may have done it in the workplace. It's a best-selling book, secular book. It's not an easy read. It's quite a heavy book. I enjoyed it, but John warned me saying it was a heavy reading, so I better tell you something. For some of you, it is a heavy reading book. I don't think you need to read the whole book. There are some books I would recommend you read. It wouldn't be at the top of the list. But what I would say is that I think if you can get yourself online a summary of the book, and you just Google, Crucial Conversations summary or something, get yourself a summary. And the summary at least should be annual material for any leader. You should, I think, review it regularly. From at least a summary perspective, because I think you'll benefit from what it says there. And essentially they define a crucial conversation as a conversation that needs to be had that most of us are reticent to have. The conversations upon which a significant change within an organisation is hanging, a significant relationship is hanging upon that crucial conversation. Now, how this book came about is a group of business scholars and people got together, and over about 30-something years, they travelled and researched and looked at the best companies, the best organisations. In fact, they weren't all businesses, there were churches and so on. And they wanted to see what is the common denominator that makes some leaders really effective and other leaders not effective. And after 32 years, I think it was, they discovered that really the number one thing that stood out above everything else, above ability, above work ethic, above all those things that we would think are the most important, and not saying they're not important, was the ability of some people to have effective, crucial conversations. That stands out as the most important thing. If you're an incredibly talented leader, but you can't have these conversations, you'll sell yourself short. If you are limited in your ability, but you can master these crucial conversations, you'll do well. And that's why the whole concept of people smarts is so important, because when you're managing a team, leading a family, leading a sporting club, being involved in any kind of area like that, where there's high investment, there's going to be the risk of relational breakdown. It just
Steve White always says culture is built on
conversation. Yeah.
And I think we've learned in levels conferences as well, when we learn about barriers to growth, and there's all sorts of things that are barriers to growth in leadership and things that can cap our leadership for lots of reasons. But one of them that I remember Ian Jagelman referring to was often it's our own headspace as leaders with what we're prepared to let go.
Yeah.
So if we know that a culture change is needed, we know that alignment's needed, we know that a shift's needed, but we haven't got the courage to have the conversations with the people that we need to have the conversations with.
Yeah.
So we just ignore it and we let it go, then it'll never change.
It'll never change.
And what Ian was saying was actually, I can tell you that some of the limitation is you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that applies to every level of leadership. Yeah. And oftentimes it boils down to this: are you able to have the crucial conversation and have it effectively?
I've had years where I resisted having conversations with
Me too.
people because I haven't had the courage, and nothing's changed.
No. And there are other people who will have the conversation but not have it effectively, and they are people blow things up, and
that's why we don't want to do it.
That's why we don't want to do it. Yeah.
Because we're scared of what might happen, because we know that it's going to change the potential
direction and relationships and everything. So identifying how to have the crucial conversation. Look, the first thing is important to recognise, and you've heard me say this in different contexts before, we need to normalise the fact that relationship challenges are going to be part of church life. They're going to be part of it. Why? It's because there is high investment. Anytime there's high emotional investment, financial investment, time investment, all that, it stands to reason that there's going to be relationship breakdowns.
And I think what we've talked about before as well is we've come from being staff members and being team members of a larger church where we were very much there was an expectation that we'd be peacemakers, that we'd steady the boat.
Yeah. So
we're kind of, for us now to be senior leaders and have to actually shift things and change things and be the ones to, like, that's been a tricky thing to do.
That's been a tricky thing to do,
because we were used to just
trying to maintain the peace,
and keeping the peace and kind of being team players.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have to have very many crucial conversations because there was other people that did that.
Yeah.
And so it's something, it's when Jonathan Kelty started to talk about this, I was like, no, please no. I'll do anything, but I don't want to have conversations.
Have those conversations. And of course, like you guys probably, you've seen people who've had the conversations that haven't gone well, and so that makes you more reticent to take them on. So
yeah, because people sometimes come away from those feeling, and I've come away from conversations with people feeling hurt and feeling bullied and feeling like, that was really destructive to me. So I don't want to then make someone else feel the way that I felt. It's a keep going.
No, it's good. Well, I won't name names. I've had conversations with different ones of you, and some of you watching now will know what I'm getting at. If you're in a team where there's culture change happening or whatever, and how do you bring about that culture change? You've got to have these conversations, because some people want things to stay the same, or they don't understand why culture is changing or whatever. And we've kind of, at least a couple of groups that I can think of off the top of my head, where we've had to say, we want to give people space to grow. It's not like we're drawing a line in the sand and saying, right, that's it, this far and no further. We don't want to lose people completely, but at the same time, we need to have those conversations in a way that is effective, so that as much as possible, we take people with us into the next season. We give them space to grow into that change, and how we do that is really important. And this crucial conversations preparation worksheet that you've got in front of you there, I'll put a link to it in the trained up notes. It's a really good tool to come back to. This is Jonathan Kelty's version that's based on the book. And anytime you have to have a crucial conversation with a team member, You know there's a conversation that, could go either way, that takes some work, especially if there's feeling involved, either for you or them or both people. This is the kind of worksheet. And I've done this in a couple of times where I've had conversations in the last few years, probably 3 times that come to mind, where I've actually sat down and filled out this sheet before I've had the conversation. And it does kind of make you feel empowered somewhat to do something about it. Jill's just checking on the cat. He's probably trying to wee on the bed or something. Yeah, that's probably
Naomi's sleeping over.
Oh, Naomi's looking after Naomi until Phil and Kim get back, so there's a mattress in there. So yeah, I want to normalise the fact that there will be potential whenever there's high investment, and in your team you have people who have invested, whether or not you're happy with how they've invested, or whether or not they're showing signs they want to invest into the new changes or the new direction you want to take or whatever. The fact remains that we want to take as many people on the journey with us as we possibly can, and so we give people space for that. So just to work through in the last couple of minutes, just to work through this sheet, I just wrote some notes down. So this sheet is basically for you to do in advance. So question step 1 is getting unstuck. So what is the question to ask is, what is the right conversation? See, we get stuck in before we have the conversation, we get stuck, and I wrote down a few ways. We get stuck by our own emotion, our own hurt. Maybe someone in our team has said something that's hurt us or affected us, or we get stuck by the fact that they're hurt and we don't want to hurt them. There's this fear of hurting other people, so that sticks us. We don't want to say anything that will upset them, saying the wrong thing. What if we're wrong? Those are the sorts of things that get us stuck. And so what's the right conversation to have? What is the conversation that I'm not holding or not holding well? And John Pancalli will often say that to me. What conversation do you need to have that you're not having? Or what conversation are you having that's not effective? And so actually asking yourself that. Oftentimes we have the wrong conversation going in our head. We're listening to our own story about this matter and we are rehearsing it over and over and over in our head. So putting it down on paper and going, what is the conversation? Name it. How might I be acting this out? Question 3, what is at the heart of my concern? So this is taking everything you're concerned about with this conversation you have to have with a team member, with a family member or workplace or whatever, and write down, articulate in 1 or 2 sentences, what is the heart of my concern? What am I concerned about in this conversation? What could go wrong in this conversation? What am I concerned could be the outcome that is making me hesitant to say anything?
We only know our story. We only know the story we tell ourselves and how we've how we perceive something. It could be a whole other story.
There is invariably. So one of the things that they use in the book, it's not actually in the notes, I don't think, but they refer to this term, the pool of meaning. Yeah. And they say that it's like a game of cards. A conversation like this, everybody has their own deck, their own hand of cards, and all they can see is their own hand of cards. So you're making decisions based upon the cards that are in your deck and not making decisions based upon the cards that are in the other person's deck. And a crucial conversation, a person who leads a crucial conversation well, actually what they have to be thinking of doing is actually making sure that everybody gets an opportunity to put their cards on the deck, on the table. So everyone gets to see everybody else's cards. Or everybody's perspective or meaning comes into the equation, sits down, and you get to see everybody's perspective. And until you have a crucial conversation, that never happens, because you can have conversations where that never happens. That's not the right kind of effective conversation. So you're looking to get everybody in. You see, first of all, you need to say, step 2, start with your heart. What do I really want for myself? What do I want for myself? What do I want for the other person? I want the other person to be engaged in my team. I want the other person to overcome that offense that they're holding, or I want that person to forgive me, get to the point where they forgive me because I was wrong. What do you want for the relationship? How would I behave if I really did want that? That's a boom question right there, because that forces you to go, okay, if this is really what I want, how should I behave? And what I found is how I should behave is often very different to how I feel like behaving. Everything inside me, especially if I'm hurt or I'm frustrated, I'm not going to behave as how I should behave. So you do it. Am I making any they're saying where did the cat go? Am I making any sucker's choices or fool's choices? The book defines a fool's choice as this concept of there's no way to have a possible candid conversation. Oh, if I bring this up, it's always going to fail. If I talk to my boss about this situation, it's just going to blow up. And so we start to talk ourselves out of the possibility that there can be a way for this to have a win-win.
I still do that, but I do it in my journal or in prayer with God. I still have a victim. I'll still pour out my heart, how I feel.
Yep.
and how all the stuff that it's triggering in me and all my pain and all of that, I pour it all out.
Good.
And then I try and make sense of it and go, God, show me what I need to see in this.
See, and that's a good point. See, I used to say that's crazy, and now I understand with my own experience and from knowledge of theology that that's actually what the Psalms are all about. David is pouring out his heart to God about his friends and how they feel, and it's in that process of pouring it out that God is able to fill him with faith. So yeah, absolutely, pour it out to God. That's all right, but then that gives you the hope to go. If you can open your heart up to God and say, okay, God, I believe that there is going to be a way forward in this, and then allow the Holy Spirit to speak to you. We're nearly done, guys. I know I'm a couple of minutes over. Learn to look and make it safe. The book Crucial Conversations talks about this issue of safety a lot. Safety is, especially if you're leading someone and you're having a conversation with someone you lead, it's vital that you are aware of their safety, because you're a leader. You're actually in a position of authority, and to not make it safe for a person you lead is actually a form of abuse. It's an abuse of power. And so if you can be conscious of making it safe and just saying things like, I'm happy to hear from you. This is what I'm feeling. What do you think? Being able to ask those questions and let people know, even use the word, it's safe to tell me. I'm not going to be offended, and force yourself to acknowledge that that person will have a different perspective to you, and start affirming them and let them know. Just be open and say, how can I make it safe for other people? Try affirming them. Don't just jump in with, well, why aren't you getting on board with this? Or why are you complaining about this? Start to ask them, to let them know that it's fine for them to share. It's okay to say, look, I want you to share. I can't guarantee that I'm going to take everything you say on board. I can't guarantee that I can acknowledge. I can't guarantee I'm going to change everything I do because of you, but I'm open to hear your heart, and I will genuinely assess it, and I'll take it on board. Most people, if they hear that, most people will share, and they'll feel okay to share. And most people will be okay if you don't necessarily take everything on board, provided they feel it's safe to share. Where people get offended is when they feel like they can't share openly. All right, moving right along to step number 4, mastering your stories. Jill said this, we all tell ourselves a story. We all rehearse our side of events. We all make assumptions about actions that another person has done, and we then tell a story, rehearse a story. So the book talks about this, and we end up telling ourselves a story which is very different to the facts. It's natural human behaviour to do this, and so the other
person I do that with is my counsellor.
Yeah, that's good too.
My raw version of this is how I felt as a victim.
Yeah.
And my pain and whatever.
It's really good for people to hear you say that.
Yeah. Because it's like, it's okay. I can do that there, because she knows how to handle it.
Yeah.
She knows how to listen to that and give me what I need.
And reframe it and help you. Yeah. And that's okay. I think, that book, Unexpected.
Edwina's really good at that as well, if anyone wants to talk to Edwina.
Edwina's just got a big list of people lining up there.
She's very cool-headed.
Yes,
and calm,
she is good like that. That's true. And so if we can get to that point where we recognise that we will all tell ourselves a story, and that it's never 100% true. So in the book they say, am I the victim, the villain? So have I victimised myself? Have I villainised the other person? Or have I said, oh, it's all too hard, it's helpless? The victim, the villain, or the helpless story. And we will all often fall into one of those characteristics. So if we're having a conversation with a team member, we'll victimise them villainise them, so that we think, oh, they're not for us, they're not against, they're not on our side. So we have to learn to reframe those questions and talking it through with somebody. Christine Caine said in that book that her biggest trouble she faced was having a friend who was close to her betray her, and she had to have 6 months of twice a week counselling. I think that's pretty severe to just deal with this friend's betrayal. And as it turned out, the friend was just hurting herself, going through something else, but it affected her dramatically. So we've got to learn to reframe what we're saying in this situation. Question 2: what am I pretending not to notice about my role? That's a boom one as well. You've got to force yourself to think, what am I ignoring in this? Why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do what they are doing? That's what Steve White says, fill the void with trust. Assuming that the other person is reasonable, rational, and decent. Not your enemy, not trying to come against the way you do things, but actually being reasonable, rational, decent.
Yeah, what's the voice? What would the voice of reason say.
Yeah.
That's what we do when we talk about risk management as well. Is what would
be the reasonable response
a
of somebody else?
person respond to this? Because that helps us to get out of our own headspace of offence.
Yeah.
We only think from how we perceive something.
Yeah, and if you can do that, if you can actually ask that question and come from the assumption that they're not out to get you, they're not out to undermine your decisions or whatever, you could actually open up to hear their.
They didn't mean to annoy you when they bumped into you in the toilet.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Which may or may not have actually.
May or may not have happened to Jill with a leader in our movement. But I'm glad. See, I didn't tell her that person probably was busy doing something else, but she's just come to that realisation herself right now. Hey, taking you 6 weeks to come to that realisation.
Yeah,
Gee, we're having the victim mentality, weren't you? What story might the other person be telling about me? Not what story they're telling you behind the back, but what story might they have? May they have victimised or villainised and so on. You can do the rest yourself, points 5, 6, and 7. But I'll give you that tool, and the idea of that is that if you have a conversation you need to have with one of your team members or a person at work or whatever, why don't you take an hour and write down that sheet? As I said, I've done it a few times. Keep it handy because it will come in handy for sure, and it can even help you to have those conversations. If you really have a really big conversation that you need to have with someone, I would recommend you get yourself a copy of the book or a summary of the book and read it. It'll help you tremendously. It's a best-selling book for a good reason.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's enough from us. If you have any questions or comments before we sign off, feel free to jump on board now.
Sorry about the cat.
Sorry about the cat. What? The cat wouldn't sit still?
It's distracting.
He's meowing and carrying on. So any questions, guys? I'll just stay here for another 60 seconds. Jump on if you've got anything that you would like to comment or ask. Maybe there's something I've missed that someone's made. I don't think so. Woof, woof. This is meow, meow. You've got a woof, woof happening at your place, have you?
Will take his bell off so he can't be drawing attention to himself.
Any thoughts, guys? Did it help you? Was it useful? Who thinks there's some conversations I need to have? Okay. Where can we find a link to the Google Calendar? That's the church Google Calendar. I have sent it out in the past in different contexts, but I will add it to. It'll be too hard to find the link right now. So what I'll do is I will put it into Trained Up. I think that's probably the best idea. Or I can actually, what I'll do is I'll email you the link. I'll send a link out to the group with a link to the Google Calendar. I'll do it as soon as the meeting finishes. I'll jump online and I'll send an email from Alvante. So the same email address that you got your invite to this meeting from, you'll get a link to the Google Calendar. Thanks, guys. Glad it was helpful. We appreciate you guys, and we love what you're doing, and praying that this stuff helps us in our personal lives and in our church life.
Yeah.
Jill's happy to talk to you about all the suffering questions, and she'll just refer them to Edwina. So Edwina's going to get it all work.
Yeah. Delegation.
Delegation. Thanks, guys. Any last questions? Everyone seems happy. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Great. All right. Well, I'll sign off, and hopefully I'll be able to upload a recording of some form or another. And once we do, I will send you the link to that. It's in Trained Up as well. I'll put it all in the same email. It's probably the easiest way. All right, guys. Have an incredible week, and look forward to Sunday. Looking forward to hearing from Ivana and Edwina on Sunday on the story of Lazarus. That'll be great. God bless, guys. See ya.